If you're tired of all of the messages being bombarded at you about your body, your weight, or what you're supposed to be eating, today's episode is for you.
We have Alicia Hill, who's here with us to talk to us about intuitive eating, how we feel about our bodies, and how to go forward in the world as an empowered, embodied woman. Join us today on another episode of Go and Be. Hi, and welcome to Go and Be. Today, we are thrilled to welcome a certified intuitive eating counselor, Alicia Hill. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Today's conversation is super valuable and very important, so I hope that you'll stick with us because we are going to be talking about busting some myths that you've probably been told your whole lives and also sharing great ways that you can love who you are, love your body, and approach your health in a healthy way. So we want to dive into the conversation and have you share with us, how did you get started? Why is this a conversation that you love?
How much time do you have, right?
28 minutes.
28 minutes. Okay, here we go. I am not different than most people out there, bombarded by diet culture in our lives. And our the main goal is to change my body, get smaller, always obsessing about what I'm eating, how I'm working out. Mm-hmm. And there came a point a few years ago where intuitive eating just kind of smacked me on the head. And I needed it so much. I was in the throes of disordered eating. And so that's how I got started. And I became a certified intuitive eating counselor. And I thought, this needs to be shared everywhere. Every person needs to hear this. We need to stop diet culture now.
So define a few things for me. Define diet culture and define intuitive eating.
Okay, so diet culture is basically a societal thing, a set of beliefs and myths that you talked about, if those go interchangeably, that we are just around constantly. There's this culture of smaller is better. You need to constantly be trying to manipulate your body. With that comes weight stigma, fat phobia, and all the messages that you see everywhere. I mean, it's just everywhere that it's so normal you don't even know that you're living in diet culture because no one's ever said, hey, wait a second, like this is bonkers.
It's just normal.
Yeah.
It's what we see all the time, so we're used
everywhere.
to it.
You're ingrained in it, and it is something that is learned. It is not what you are born with intuitively. So that's the difference with intuitive eating. You are born with intuition. You are born an intuitive eater, which means when you were born, you were already given and bestowed everything you need to do and know to take care of yourselves and how to feed yourself. And so what diet culture has done is we have stopped trusting our own intuition and stopped listening to our own bodies and started taking all the external cues from diet culture. And so it's completely covered up our actual intuition that we were born with, which is really all we need to feed ourselves and to take care of our health.
So what is the problem with embracing diet culture and just living in where we're living? Why do we want to learn about intuitive eating? What is the problem there?
Well, if you don't have a problem with diet culture, then great. Like, I'm never going to invalidate anybody's experience, and I'm a big believer in body autonomy. But I think if we were all being really honest with ourselves, we could see how consuming it is, how much time, energy, mental space, money, sacrifices of our relationships that diet culture takes from us and steals from our lives. For that reason, you want to try to free yourself from diet culture. Lots of us don't even know what it means to do that. So that's like a great question. But once you start to see like how much this has cost me in my life, and is this actual true health that I'm feeling, right? We're so worried about our physical health all the time that we're neglecting a holistic health, which is your spiritual health and your mental health and your emotional health.
Mm-hmm. But you actually have some really good connections to how we take care of our body and the spiritual part of that too. So share with us some ways that we can approach this from a spiritual and a healthy mindset that helps us create a new foundation and a new culture of how we approach our bodies, also in connection with a higher power.
Right. So being members of the LDS Church, we know so much about our bodies, right, and their purpose and why we were blessed with them. And there was a time in the pre-existence when we were so anxious to receive a body and so excited to do that. And then we come here and we learn through diet culture that we hate our bodies and we are disgusted with them and we're constantly trying to change them. And so, I mean, that is just a huge disconnect from our soul, right? And from who we really are and what we were put on this earth to do. It's such a huge barrier to living your true purpose on earth. And so I can't help but interfere with your spirituality and your connection. It just can't.
When I think about Joseph Smith's experience in the Grove, where he saw God the Father and Jesus Christ, yes, we learned so much about the Godhead and about who God is and the nature of God. But something that I learned from that experience is that I have an embodied Heavenly Mother, and that every part of me is in the image of my Heavenly Mother. And so it's incredibly painful to be along the path of body acceptance and having bought into diet culture for so long, and recognizing that in calling myself bad and wrong and finding myself disgusting or whatever other adjective I want to use, I'm actually rejecting my Heavenly Mother and being created in God's image. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It feels really hurtful, right? That word. When you start to realize, like, oh my goodness, like just that kind of epiphany of how I've been disconnecting myself from my spiritual parents and the gift that they've given me. And when you start to look at this war, we know Satan wages war on our bodies. And yet we forget that it's part of that is being so obsessed with how they look and so concerned with our health while neglecting the greater picture and the bigger perspective. And we've really all fallen victim to this, and we've kind of knowingly done it. And I think it's a really great place to stop and give yourself a lot of compassion, because that hurts. It hurts that I've done this, I've thought this about myself, I've looked at my body in disgust, in a way I've disrespected my heavenly parents, like you alluded to. But to really stop, and none of this is your fault. None of this is your fault. This is just the way we have been raised and the culture that we have lived in. And 100%, I attribute it all to Satan and his great deceit and his genius and what he's done to oppress women specifically and to keep us down from our true nature, because he knows how powerful we could be.
If we're
and how we are
embodied,
if we are embodied is
body,
a great
mind,
word.
and spirit.
Is a great word. Body, mind, and spirit. Absolutely, that attunement, that connection, that intuition that we were born with, and that is what we are here to do. It gets clouded and covered up.
So I want to jump into the steps of what I do if I want to learn about intuitive eating. What is intuitive eating? But before we do that, give me just a glimpse. I've asked you a question personally of what does it feel like to be embodied, to feel happy and joyful and at peace within your body? What does it feel like? I want people to get a taste of it.
Yeah. The word that always comes to my mind as I started my intuitive eating practice, and as I, even at the very beginning, as I started those little steps and I started doing it and seeing how it changed me, the word that always came to my mind was freedom. Or liberation. I just felt so liberated from these chains that had held me back, and this hate. When we come back to the old answer, love is always the answer. It really is the answer for everything. And so it opened my eyes to these capabilities of, gosh, look at all the things I get to do now with my life instead of worrying about what my body looks like. And it makes me angry when I think about like how much time I was spent in that place. But I don't mind that anger because I redirect it, right? I take it and I use it for good and put energy into things now that really matter.
Do you remember a specific moment when you were going from diet culture and being in that mental place? Do you remember a moment where you recognized, oh, I'm embodied? And I feel what it feels like to feel free. That word you used, freedom.
Right, it is such a freedom. I don't know if I can remember a specific moment. A big thing for me was food freedom, like unconditional permission to eat. And that's still a big thing for me now, so I'll go to that, is that I can eat any food and have the same emotional reaction to it, whether it's A or B, right? And so that to me still gives me a thrill. Like, I can check in with myself and say, what sounds good? What feels good? How much do I want, right? And I can eat that food and I can go on with my day. That still like gives me a high, because it was
After years
of not being able to do that, right? And being so preoccupied with what I was going to be eating and so worried about where I was going to find my next clean food, right? And how I was going to manage my day around food. Now I go about my day, and food is a great part of it, but it's not controlled by food anymore. It's a really enjoyable experience.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, let's start. Let's hear, if I am totally new to this, which I would say I'm on the path, but I'm pretty new. Where do I start?
You start with a book. Intuitive Eating was written about 20 years ago, and it's still just the bomb. You know, that's your go-to if you want to learn about intuitive eating. They also have a workbook you can use to go along with as you're reading. So it all kind of just depends on how much help, like how much hand-holding, not in a bad way, you know, but like how much hand-holding you need through the process. Because then there's certified intuitive eating counselors like myself, that if you want just an extra little support, a little more guidance, you can reach out for help there. But intuitive eating is a framework and a philosophy. There's 10 principles. And when people ask me what I do, I help people heal their relationship with food and body in a nutshell. That kind of encapsulates the whole thing. And so it's 10 principles that you work through. And it's a practice, it's a journey. It's so opposite of diet culture. Diet culture is so black and white and linear, and just tell me what to do, and and I'll get results, right? Like, it's so linear, and that's just not how life is, right? Intuitive eating is a relationship with your body. It's an attunement to your own guidance and your own wisdom, and it can't help but seep into every other area of your life. Intuitive eating is not just about food in your body. It honestly, every client I've ever talked to, it seeps into all areas of their life and frees them in so many other ways too.
I have a testimony of this. I know it sounds strange, but I was on a diet for the millionth time in my life because judgment that my body's bad and wrong.
Sure.
It happened to be keto, not that it matters, but I was on keto. I was doing keto, and my visiting teacher called. It was before we had ministering, and she said, I just made the world's best chocolate chip cookies, and if you weren't on keto, I would bring you one. And I know it sounds silly and funny, but something inside of me broke.
Yep.
And I grabbed a notebook and my keys and a pen, and I went to the canyon, which is anything other than the temple. If you want a sacred space, for me, it's nature. And I went to nature, and I wrote on the top of my notebook, what does my body want me to know? And I'm like, this is so cheesy. I'm like, my body's gonna take forever to speak to me, but I will sit here and listen. And it was seriously just 1 second. And I started journaling, and I journaled 3 pages. And before I knew what I had done, it was that long. And I went, wow, what did I even write? And I turned back the page, and in the middle of the page, it said, I will never go on a diet again. And I had circled it to where the paper was almost torn through. And I didn't even remember doing it. And I thought, wow, that is deep. That is some deep pain. And so I said, I guess I'm not on keto now. So what do I want?
You want the cookie.
I didn't. That's the interesting thing. In my mind, I said I had been on keto for months. And so I had no fruit. And when I asked myself, I was like, okay, I'm gonna drive out of the canyon and to the grocery store. What do you want if nothing is bad? But my body said, I want a peach. I know that seems silly, but I wanted a peach, and I went and I got a peach, and it was out of season, but it was fine. And I ate it, and it was the most delicious thing ever to me. And I wish I could say that my journey with intuitive eating has been really easy since then, but that was just like the baby step.
Yeah.
And now it's learning how to unravel all of this diet culture and everything that's been ingrained. But I firmly believe that God doesn't want our bodies to be on diets. I don't know. That's the gospel according to me.
The thing I think about constantly about this alluding to that is our bodies were made for us. We weren't made for our bodies. Just the whole Sabbath day, the Sabbath was made for us. We weren't made for the Sabbath. And so I think in our culture, we've taken it that we were made for these bodies, right? And so our purpose of our bodies becomes very skewed in that. And because I think you're right, I don't think God had any intention of us coming here and working so hard,
hating ourselves, starving ourselves, having one version of
that's
good.
Not what He wants us to be putting all of our time and energy
It's
into.
one of His creations.
Right.
Like He created it. Like we think about it separately, like, oh, I would change 52 things about my body, right? And yet at the same time, like it is a divine creation. Like He made a flower or a mountain or an animal. Like there are so many great pieces of it we forget. And one of the things that I've been working on right now, I feel like the adversary's attacks are so frequent and coming from so many directions for myself, for people around me. Like the best thing I can do right now is whenever I think a thought, I ask myself the question, is that the adversary or would that come from somewhere else? And I start to identify, that's the adversary, that's Satan. Satan's a jerk, that's not gonna help me. But it's a constant battle. Like I read Intuitive Eating when it first came out in college, like 20 years ago. And so I still think through a lot of those principles. And yet at the same time, because we're constantly getting bombarded from the media, from friends, from others, from whatever the latest diet is, like this is one of those things that you have to be ready, all out war to look at it, because you can forget so quickly and easily about what really matters when you get distracted. And that's another one of Satan's tools. He's like, hey, let me distract you from this thing that you think is this beautiful body. And let me just distract you from that and show you, hey, the world would love for you to believe this. So it's like a really heads down focused effort to go back to key core principles. And I think, like you said, at the root of it, it's love. Whenever I'm worried about who I am or what I look like, that is not the Savior speaking to me. That's not the Spirit. That would be a dark force trying to keep me from my mission. And if He can make me believe that I can't do what God wants me to be in this body, He wins every day.
Right. He does.
So as you think about some of these conversations, I'm grateful I was raised by a mom who didn't talk about it a lot. And I feel like that's a gift to me.
Yes.
And she never colored her hair, bless her heart. I color my hair. But she was just very comfortable with who she was, and that was a gift. And I try to give that to my daughter, and I try to have conversations with her that say, like, the world will say, how does that fit? And I say, how does that feel? And we don't look at numbers as much as we say, hey, let's find the size that makes you feel good, or whatever that is. So we're trying to have these conversations, and yet I also feel like we haven't gotten to the place where we really dive in. And so as you look back, and if you look at moms and women, what conversations would you have that we can have today that help our youth heal some of these things or prepare for some of these things before they're at places where they're
bombarded?
Yeah.
So our children are bombarded, like out of the womb. I mean, really, it's insane. The biggest gift you're going to be able to give your children is your example, like you just talked about your mom, that it almost doesn't even need to be said. I always think of my children that I realize I could do it perfectly right at home and make sure there's no body talk and there's no shame or guilt or judgment, but they're going to be in the world. And so I think I know that I'm giving them a safe haven. When they come home, it's safe. I want my children to know that all bodies are good, right? Every body is good, and that they are a person first and foremost, not a body to be looked at and judged and picked apart. When we're looking at and judging, there's these 52 parts about myself that I don't like, right? Like, we're a whole being. We are a whole beautiful creation. And to pick yourself apart is definitely Satan's tools, like you were talking about. Diet culture can feel really comfortable for people because it can be covering up other things, right? You're using diet culture to cover up other emotions that you don't want to feel, or trauma that you don't want to address. And so it can becomes this kind of safe, it's kind of a known safe haven. It's so tricky. Diet culture is so good at what it does. It's a $70 billion industry a year, $70 billion in industry. So it knows what it's doing. And so you are going to kind of feel, when you start intuitive eating, like you're out on a raft by yourself in the middle of the ocean, because everyone around you is doing something totally different. And so it can feel very hard and challenging because it's hard work.
Sure.
It's not a quick fix like diet culture is telling you. Look like this and you'll feel better, right? Like, that's just not true body image. Body image is not based on appearance. If I could say one thing to people about that, your body image has nothing to do with how you look, but everything to do with how you think and what you allow yourself to believe and think. And so in a society that is profiting off of our doubts and off of our self-hate, because they're creating that self-hate. So they're creating the self-hate,
So
and
they
then
can sell
they're
you
profiting.
something.
Yes, they're profiting off it, which is not going to work. P.S. Spoiler alert, not going to work long term. And then they've made it so now you're blaming yourself. I mean, it's the most brilliant business plan ever, because they are creating the fails, right? Because it's not going to work, and then we'll give you another product. This time it will work, so you'll put more money in. And instead of stopping and looking at diet culture and being like, hey, what? You're blaming yourself, right? It's all about you, and so then you're spending more money. So in a society that profits off our doubts, liking yourself is really rebellious, right? And we're not used to being very rebellious, especially in our LDS culture. And so I think it can be even more common. I mean, that can be a whole nother show, but can be even more common in our religious culture to follow the rules, right? And we're very good at rituals, dieting rituals. It all kind of goes in together. And so, anyways, it will be difficult, but it's the dividends and the payout and the reward is the most amazing feeling, to actually feel like you're living authentically, right? You're just being you without all that other garbage that's been piled on top of you.
When you talk about the $70 billion a year industry, the thing that came to my mind is the line in the Word of Wisdom that talks about the cunning designs of evil men in the last days, that our food and the way we look at food, the way we look at what we consume will be affected by cunning and evil. And that is what I see happening. And it's so tricky because they have seen the body positivity movement, right? And so now instead of saying, go on a diet, they're saying, here's my health plan.
Here's my lifestyle.
This is the health.
Wellness.
They're using health, wellness, lifestyle, that we all want health.
Yeah.
We all want wellness. We all want a great lifestyle. But they've used it and they've taken everything that our moms heard about dieting and they've now just attached different words to it.
Yeah, they're smart. I mean, it's just marketing and advertising. They know what they're doing. They have hijacked all the right words and made them theirs. And so, I mean, that's why when I speak, I have to put health in quotation marks, because it doesn't mean anymore what it actually is supposed to mean, right? And so they know what they're doing, and diets are kind of uncool now, right? Yeah. Like, diets were our mother's generation thing. And so we don't want to
health
say,
plan.
I'm on clean
choice.
eating, a lifestyle change, wellness. You package it any way you want, it's still a diet if they're promising.
And there's
weight loss.
nothing wrong with eating clean. Something that I've struggled with as I've tried to say, okay, Heavenly Father, what did you mean when I was in the canyon? And you said never go on a diet again. Because I ate the peach, but then I ate all the things. And I'm like, I'm not attaching judgment to any of them. But then I was eating to the point of sickness. I was not healthy on the opposite extreme. And so then what do you do?
It's just a rebound effective restriction.
Yeah.
It's just classic. People are like, I binge eat, I'm addicted to food. I mean, that, again, a whole nother episode, right? Mm-hmm. The very first thing I always want to talk to a client is look at your restriction. 99% of the time, if you think you're binging or you can't stop eating, it's because you've restricted so much in the past, right? It's kind of that, I mean, it's this extreme. You just went from one pendulum to the other, right? And it's okay. People think, oh, see, that's proof. I'm out of control. I need more rules. I need more rigidity, because look, that's proof. But it's not. It's the rigidity and the rules that are going to swing you to the binging and the feeling like you're overeating. And really, that's just your body's way of eating. Like, if you went underwater and held your breath for a long time, when you came up out of the water, you wouldn't do a polite little right breath. You would gasp for air. Your body would be screaming for air. And so you would be sucking it in. And so that is your body's biological way of protecting you, because it's like, oh, she's letting us eat. Hurry and eat, because I don't know when she's going to restrict again, because that's what she keeps doing, right? So it's just protecting you. And we've been so mean to our poor bodies when their job is to keep us alive. It just wants to keep us alive. And so it's gonna do whatever it has to do to make sure you have food storage in your body, because you keep restricting and you keep not feeding me. So heck yes, it's sending it's releasing hormones. It's sending all those signals to make you eat. That's not a lack of willpower or proof that you need to go on a diet. That is biologically feeding yourself.
And so when that happens, instead of being like, oh, now I'm eating all the cookies, I can be like, wow, my body's awesome.
Yeah.
It's biologically telling me the right thing to do. When I read the book, I was impressed to learn that it takes about a year if you truly espouse the principles and you give yourself grace. It takes about a year for your body to kind of learn the signals back, to get those signals that we're born with, and to recognize them again.
Yeah, they become dulled, right? As we stop listening to our bodies and we start listening to external diet culture, the inner voices get quieter, right? We don't hear them. And then they kind of stop talking because we're not listening and we're not respecting them. You know, I never would put a time frame on intuitive eating. Actually, I would. It's your life. It's the rest of your life. Okay, it's going to take the rest of your life. It's going to get easier, obviously, as you practice it and as you go. But a lot of it will depend on your history with dieting. If you've spent decades hating your body and dieting, then it's going to take you a little bit longer than someone who's only been on one diet and who's always been pretty okay with their body until recently. You know what I mean? So it's very, very personal. And I would never put a time frame on it except to say that it's a practice for the rest of your life, and it's glorious.
I love the word practice. Because I can practice something. I may not be perfect at it, but I can practice it.
There's no perfection in intuitive eating. There's no such thing as doing it perfect, because that's not intuitive. That's diet culture. Again, we got to be really careful. When you start thinking it's all or nothing thinking, it's perfect or I've messed up, that is all diet culture talk. It's compassion, it's curiosity, it's knowing that every time you eat a snack or a meal, it's an opportunity to learn about your preferences. It's an opportunity to learn about your body and what it's communicating to you. It's a very mindful practice. And so I actually love that about intuitive eating. You cannot get it wrong. There's no right or wrong.
Beautiful. Okay, well, we ask all of our guests one question at the end of every show. We ask our guests if you could share one piece of advice to someone listening or watching on how to go into the world and be, what would you say to them?
I would say go and be who you are right now. You do not have to wait to be anything else. You are enough right now. You are worthy right now. You do not have to be smaller. I want you to take up space. I want you to be loud. I want you, if that's who you are, right? I want you to be who you are right now, completely independent of what you think your body looks like or how you think about your body. Go right now and be yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's so, so beautiful.
And absolutely needed. And it's like we need that on repeat, right? Yeah. Every day.
You do. You have to be actively feeding yourself those messages, and you have to be actively retraining your mind and those thoughts. It's a practice.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being with us,
Thank
Alicia.
you.
I love this conversation. We could have for a lot longer and a lot more. For those of you who are with us today, we're so thankful that you tuned in, and we honor you for giving us the last 28 minutes of your life. And as you continue on in this conversation, we hope that you'll find ways that you can healthily explore these conversations, and you can find Alicia if you want additional help. But know that there are ways for you to feel who you are. And until we meet again, go and be someone who loves their body. Go and be someone who feels divinely connected to your Creator. Go and be.
Sweet salt. Sweet Salt Modest Clothing at Sequel Book.